the Bears lost a football game. What a surprise. But even bigger news, they fired their head coach on Friday. How did you feel about the game specifically on Thanksgiving? Like, what did you like to see, didn't like to see, just your general thoughts?
I went into that game with really, really, really low expectations. But yeah, that first half didn't surprise me at all. It just seemed like a team that was super ready to quit, and it was already quit probably multiple times over the season before. They had given up on their coach, and their coach wasn't ready. Say what you will about Matt Eberflus, he plays Ben Johnson really, really well. I don't think Ben Johnson is as hot as everybody wants him to be. Personally, it's one of those reasons that I don't want him as a head coach for us moving forward next year. I'd rather have Thomas Brown than Ben Johnson, frankly. Yeah, it was what I expected. Bears were pretty much ready to call it quits. And then the second half happened, and then Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams happened. And as always, I was locked in, and I was ready to win, and I was ready to stop being a negative Nancy about draft picks and talking about draft picks. And I've been ready for that, but unfortunately, Matt Eberflus is inevitable. He is like fucking Thanos. He was collecting his divisional infinity stones, making sure we lost again. So yeah, it was a fucking heartbreaker. Might have been the worst one of the year in the sense of it was probably the most avoidable heartbreaker of the year. We've had a lot of avoidable ones, but this one was probably the most directly avoidable. And so I hated every second of it. And yeah, it was a perfect cherry on top of the turd Sunday that was Matt Eberflus's coaching career. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm going to ask you your thoughts in just a second on what you would have done to end the game, because there was a sparked debate. I would call it a near heated debate on Twitter. I'm going to point out the J2K, the great J2K. J2K, if you're listening, because I hope you are, I respect the heck out of your opinion when we talk on this, and I don't think that you're wrong. But I do think that there was a much better way that they could have handled it, because when you are forced to have... Well, here's what happened. So to end the game, Caleb Williams was asked to run a quarterback draw on second and whatever it was, I think. So he gets sacked. Larry Borum, good old Larry Borum, the grocery bag clerk, whatever you want to call him, he allowed a free rusher sack on a quarterback draw. I don't know how that happens. So it's 3rd down and 26. And you've got 32 seconds left and a timeout. And all you can do at that point is run one play and end the game on an incomplete pass. How can you let that happen? What J2K's point on this was that you're not supposed to call the timeout, because the second you call the timeout, you lose any ability to throw the football over the middle of the field. And to that I say that is wrong. Because if you do call a timeout, it's 3rd and 26, and you do throw the ball over the middle of the field, 15 yards, 20 yards, maybe even a 10-yard over the field, right? You have more than enough time to get to the line of scrimmage. You have enough time to then run your team off the field and get your field goal kicking unit onto the field. You can't spike it because it becomes 4th down, right? Because this is all happening on 3rd and 26. So if you get it to 4th and 15, you cannot spike because you turn it over on downs. So you could do either that. You could also do it to the point where if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, you can't get the field goal unit on the field, you call 2 plays. In my opinion, that's what a good offensive team, a good coaching staff would do, is call 2 plays in that sense, right? This is the play we're going to run for one half of the field, re-rack, run the other side of the field if it doesn't, if we can't get the field goal unit off for whatever reason, in my opinion. I think that there are a plethora of options, but J2K's point specifically was that you can't call the timeout, and essentially he blamed it all on Caleb Williams. And I don't know how you can do that, because you're asking Caleb Williams to be the rookie quarterback who's being fed information in his headset while he's being picked up the ground off after a sack. And then you also have to have him be the game manager. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all, Dave. I don't know if you disagree or what.
No, I get J2K's logic. If this is a more experienced quarterback with much more situational football and situational awareness built into him, I just don't think that you can, for a lot of reasons. You can't expect a rookie quarterback to game manage, plus do all the crazy plays, plus bring you back in the second half, throw 3 touchdowns and all that stuff. It's so stupid, because this is part of what me and Paul said on our channel. Caleb Williams is going to have to overcome the stupidity of the coaching staff. And basically what Matt Eberflus is almost accusing Caleb Williams of doing is like, hey, man, I know you had a bad first half due to game plan. I know you brought us back in the second half. I know you single-handedly dragged the corpse of this team through my shitty coaching experience, but I need you to do a little bit more. I need you to run a 30-second drill on 3rd and 26 and also do it correctly and have a play ready in your back pocket and stuff like that. It's just asking too much, man. If you're talking about a simple win for a desperate team, guys, like, let's be honest, this was anything you could have done. Get fucking blocked again. Honestly, get blocked again. It's better than that shit. It really would have been. So, like, if you're Matt Eberflus in that situation and you have just had this, like, 4 or 5 week dog shit skid, my only thoughts are, if that is an instant play, right, make it a running back handoff to the right side hash so that you're giving Cairo Santos his favorite hash to kick from 57 yards away, 56 yards or whatever it would have been. Then I can understand. It's like an instant, quick running play just to gain a yard or two. You're not going to lose a yard or two. You need to give your team every chance, even if it's like 5% chance. Matt Eberflus is great with 2% chances. So if it's just a 2% chance of your team actually winning this game, give them that 2% chance. Let Cairo Santos kick his career-long field goal from the right hash. Indoors. Just let him try. It's inexcusable. It's been covered. It's been talked about. It's been, just absolutely discussed at this point to death. But it is the worst for sure this year that Matt Eberflus pulled off. That's why I said it was the most painful one because it was that avoidable. But if you go back to even our episode for me and Paulie, I said I'd give it an 80-85% chance Flus is fired after this week. Even though I don't have any insider knowledge, I don't have anything. You could just feel that vibe. 3 straight divisional losses in a row, and it just had to be done. And yeah, give your kicker a chance, call a timeout. There's no excuse. So that's the one way to handle it. If you're handling it with a right side run it down to 3 seconds, make it an overtime game. If not, if you are, dude, call a timeout with 30 seconds left, run one play, run like your best outside beater, and then see where the chips lie. And like you said, if you have to, run your field goal unit out. Because I think at the moment when they could have called the earliest possible timeout was like 32 seconds left. And that's
correct. He was on the ground 33 seconds. So you're going to get another tick. It goes to 32 seconds, right? So yeah. The shitty part about all of this, again, the call was a quarterback draw. And I'd have to look back at it I don't think it's insane at all because you were in fringe field goal range already. And the way that they were defending that, to my understanding, there was enough room to be had for Caleb Williams. If he squeaks through the A-B gap, whatever you want to call it, I think he's getting those 10, 15 yards, and we're looking at like a 35 to 40-yard field goal indoors to tie against the best team in football. And to Cliff Victoria's point, I don't know if Matt Eberflus being fired would be a straw that broke the camel's back. I think what really happened was we were hearing rumors now that once the dust is starting to settle, that actually Ryan Poles was pushing for Matt Eberflus to be fired after the Patriots game, because that was the game where you really shit your bet at home. Should it be the team that is essentially down in the dumps? They're going to get a top 10 pick. No shot. That won't happen. And if you win that game, you're well and true on your way to fixing whatever weirdness happened against the Redskins, and you're really starting to talk about like the playoff picture. Obviously, it's outside looking in, very difficult to come back and defeat all these teams in your division. But for what has been happening to happen again on Thanksgiving Day in front of the whole world, I think George finally said, you know what, fuck this, enough is enough. And I think this will segue good into the next point where some people are saying that the Bears had misdone the Eberflus family by firing him 2 hours after letting him do a Zoom interview. To my understanding, according to Adam Johns, he said that the decision had not been made while Eberflus was doing that Zoom interview, which was roughly 10 minutes. So if Eberflus can, trash on Bears fans and their families for the last month, why can't the Bears, take a dump, so to speak, on Matt Eberflus one singular time? It's not like Matt Eberflus is going to go broke over this. He's going to be well paid. He's going to be able to get some time off with his family, which is fine. It sucks. I think that Matt Eberflus will find his way back into coaching some way, somehow. But Dave, what are your thoughts? Do you think that the Bears did wrong by firing Matt Eberflus the day after Thanksgiving?
No, I think big picture wise, and I mean, we can go through the details because there's so many and it's juicy. And even one day after the fact, and Karl, I called you to just talk about it because it got so juicy one day after the fact, because usually it takes like a couple months to a year to talk about these kind of like weird details that leak out between, teams that try to keep stuff in-house. And I think the timeline of everything is a few things. One is, as much as I wanted to believe otherwise, this reeked of McCaskey interference from the start. As much as George has always said that this is out of his hands now and that Ryan Poles is in charge and Kevin Warren is in charge, George is still doing all of it. And he is the cancer of this team. I cannot emphasize enough. I've said it once, I'll say it 100 times. If George McCaskey tried to shake my hand, I'd reach in and I'd tell him to go fuck himself. And I would do it. That man is the worst. Secondly, you want to talk about the insulting nature of it all, right? Like, if that's the point we want to start on, which is it insulting to Eberflus? Is it insulting to the fans? It's insulting to everyone because you punted on a season that Ryan Poles was actively trying to save. Now, lost in the shuffle here is, at this point, I don't believe, no, I'm quite sure, Shane Waldron wasn't fired. So who are you promoting to interim head coach if Ryan Poles is trying to fire him during the Patriots game or after the Patriots game? So are we promoting Eric Washington then? We never get the Thomas Brown experiment, which leads to Thomas Brown being interim head coach. So it's a very big sliding doors moment. But if you're actively talking about saving a season, George McCaskey, not by association, not by accident, directly stopped him from trying to save a season of football. These are rare, man. You get 4 years of Caleb Williams before he tries to get a trade out of here at this point, right? Because I mean, it is what it is. Like, if Caleb Williams is stuck on this type of shit for 3 to 4 years, he will not be a Chicago Bear past his rookie contract. We can all just acknowledge
I would like to immediately counter that point by just saying that the Bears, I think firing an offensive coordinator in the middle of the season was unique in itself. But I know for a fact that the Bears had never traded a head, or sorry, we'll get to that point a little bit later. But they've never fired a head coach in the middle of a season. So I think just that act alone tells Caleb Williams that we are willing to move heaven, hell, earth, and whatever else you believe in to make sure that Caleb Williams is not only happy, but surrounded and put into the best possible situation. Sorry to cut you off there, but I think that Caleb Williams is going to be happy here moving forward, and it's this offseason is really going to be all about him. You're going to see that.
It better be, because I agree with you. Like, right, like the signs. This is baby steps of a mom and pop shop becoming a professional organization, right? Because I think a professional organization would have done much more. I don't know what's going on here. Thanks. I think you need to do much more than firing an offensive coordinator when something is this bad. And what we saw is what you get. Like, I think that part of it is George McCaskey, and I said this to a friend of mine, the Bears are one of the best things that George McCaskey is. His talent is making a catastrophic mistake, fucking up catastrophically, and then fixing his catastrophic mistake, not by like 360ing it and making a great decision in response. He'll make a catastrophic mistake, fix it to about 50%, and then pat himself on the back for not fucking making the catastrophic mistake look even worse. So right now you are, let's be generous and say status quo to where you should have started this season, with somebody like Thomas Brown and a legitimate head coaching candidate who is an offensive mind, who could match up and pair up with Caleb Williams. If this has happened at the beginning of the year, we'd all be apprehensive and we'd all be second guessing it, but at least we'd be interested, right? If Thomas Brown was hired as your head coach day one, beginning of the year, because I think it would have gone better this season. But now what we're going to see is George pat himself on the back for making Thomas Brown have 5 games left to actually execute some version of a decent looking team. And then we're going to get like a 3-2 last 5 games, maybe even a 4-1 if we're lucky. And then George is going to be like, look how good I did. I fixed it. Look at me, guys. I did this thing. And in reality, this should have been the thing from the very beginning, or at least from the Patriots game. So don't tell me about how it's hurting Eberflus, it's hurting the fans. You've sacrificed a full season of football, George. I don't want to hear about who got offended and who got hurt. You sacrificed millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of fans or millions of fans. You pissed all of them off. You are dooming or setting back a franchise quarterback. Like, it's all bad. It's all still George. You want to talk about who got their feelings hurt? It's everybody, because George is a fuck up.
The big juicy detail that a lot of people are talking about is actually that a lot of players in the locker room who had disbelief on their face on the field when the game was lost, once they reached the locker room, it really boiled over. There was some yelling at Eberflus, and the tree topper here in this scenario was Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson was not having it, according to Adam Johns. In quotes, he says that Jalen went crazy, one Bears player said. He was very emotional and pissed, but rightfully so. He's been here longer than most. And if you guys had seen his interview, I believe on Tuesday, before the Thanksgiving game, he looked pissed in the interview. So for him to kind of play his butt off, have the team have the bend but don't break philosophy, essentially get your ass kicked in the first half, and have your quarterback take you all the way back, and even to the last dying moments of the game, have your quarterback take you half the way down the field on a 99-yard ask to win the game, or a field goal to tie, of course. But to finally have that ripped from you again after all these performances, I really can't blame Jalen Johnson for screaming and getting mad. It sucks. Something that wasn't mentioned in this article, but I find very, very funny as well. If you guys are on Twitter, you guys should follow Jaquan Brisker. Jaquan Brisker he's a very funny, a very animated, very lively guy. I don't like him as much as others because I'm not a fan of Penn State, and he very much is. That's his school. But when Eberflus did the interview at 9 a.m., he tweeted a laughing emoji, and then he tweeted something along the lines of "God doesn't make mistakes," something like that when he did get fired. And then the funny one today, which I don't know if everyone has seen, he actually said, "It feels good to be back on grass," smiley face. So it's almost as if he was put on IR because his antics off the field. So hopefully he actually doesn't have a concussion, or a lot of people are saying that Matt Eberflus has given him this migraine that are having these symptoms come back. Sorry for that tangent. But outside of that, I think...
You know what? I think it's a relevant tangent, though. I think it's a relevant tangent. Because Paul and I have said... I said this the day Matt Eberflus got hired. It's part of my biggest issue with him. He's a nice guy with nice opinions, and he has a nice team, and that's what Indianapolis was when he left. And sometimes in football, you need a couple of crazy guys who hit hard. And Jaquan Brisker, whether you like him or not, or how you feel about him, Penn State or otherwise, is a crazy dude who hits hard and plays well.
He also has that ability that what's that son of a bitch's name? He went from the Saints to he's on the Eagles again. He was on the Lions last year. Johnson. Yeah, that son of a bitch. I hate him. But that's the kind of asshole that you sometimes need, the little chirping that he does. I adore it. I'm sorry, keep going.
And you're right. You need it. You need this on a team. You need some attitude. You need some of these guys
that offsets the Jalen Johnson, shut the hell up and play hard. I mean, you can't have a team of just that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where if Eberflus is talking about his principles and being this and being that and trying hard, and you dude, football is not a nice sport. It's an hour-long sport that lasts 4 hours where all dudes do is bash the shit out of each other. And you want a bunch of nice guys to be respectful and follow the hits principle. You're stupid if you think that's how it goes. And everything that I've heard from Sean McVay about Thomas Brown, about I know Thomas Brown played in Georgia. I think it was Kirby Smart making comments about Thomas Brown's if that's the head coach of Georgia. Like I said, I'm not a football guy, but they were commenting about like Thomas Brown's track record as a player, as a coach. And they were just talking about how he was just like the hardest working, biggest. He was like anything he wanted to do, he would have done it. He would have smashed him in the mouth. He would have beat the shit out of him. And that's what Thomas Brown's attitude is. And I guarantee you, Thomas Brown is going like, man, I need Jaquan Brisker back out there. If it's an attitude thing that Matt Eberflus just doesn't like, because the way it sounds, if all of a sudden Jaquan Brisker is healed and he's back on the grass, it sounds more like Jaquan Brisker pulled a Jalen Johnson 4 or 5 weeks ago before it was socially acceptable. Where Jaquan Brisker is going like, what the fuck are we doing here? And then Matt Eberflus goes, you need to sit down. And now Jalen Johnson does it, your team captain, the best player on your team. And it blows over in the media. And now it's a point where it kind of, that's why I'm saying it is relevant. It is funny to talk about and stuff like that, but it is relevant, man. Because when one of your best players on your team is being benched because he has an attitude problem or calls it how it is, that's a problem with the coach, not the player. So yeah, I'm with you though. I just didn't want to. I wanted to just make a tangent on that.
I think a lot of the players coming out and saying, "Oh, I would have done this," or "I'm frustrated that this happened." I almost think that it's just a domino effect from the lack of accountability. So absolutely, a lot of the media and a lot of the people in this space, viewers, podcasters, they all seem to think that taking accountability is the number one top priority thing just so that they can feel good. I actually disagree with that. I think that a coach admitting defeat is kind of a huge red flag. Not to say that it shouldn't happen, and obviously you see a Dan Campbell do it all the time, almost to the point where it's like a Disney movie a little bit with him. But if you really take accountability when it matters, hopefully that would tell your players to not kind of have these tantrums, things like that, or just not having your players on the same page, like having a DJ Moore say, "Oh, I don't know why this happened," things like that. I mean, that's why that stuff is happening.
The philosophy with that, I agree with you 100%, Karl. But and this is a quick way to summarize it, and we can move on if you want to. But yeah, Mike Tomlin is the definition of what Matt Eberflus is trying to be. A guy who's literally like, I've heard Mike Tomlin say this, like everything is kept in-house. We do not let things leave this room. That is Matt Eberflus's theory. But the problem is that with Mike Tomlin, he will call himself out or just not make that mistake to begin with. So it's easier to have self-accountability and or accountability on your people under you when you are either A, making less mistakes than them and you know better, or when you do make a mistake, you own it, say, hey guys, this is where I messed up. This is how we're going to fix it, and it will never happen again. Now we can move on to what you guys also do well.
The key point with all of that,
keep making the mistakes though, as Matt Eberflus did forever and ever.
He's not practicing what he's preaching. What do you think that Thomas Brown has to do on the Chicago Bears specifically to be the head coach of this football team next year, if there even is an option for him to do that?
Man, I don't think the bar has been set very high, and I don't think that his performance needs to necessarily be very, very high. I think that, unfortunately, the Bears are, first and foremost, looking at this as a potentially cheap upgrade. And I think the Bears do most things on a wing and a prayer, hoping that they luck out, hoping that, hey, part of the theory that I have here with Thomas Brown and how it goes is if Thomas Brown does decent or mediocre, and he has a good 5-game set, if he goes to another team based on that audition and the Bears go with the popular choice, I think the popular choice will underperform and Thomas Brown will go somewhere and absolutely dominate and be a really good head coach. And if Thomas Brown does really well here and we hire him, or if he does 3-2 and does mediocre, I think we're still going to hire him, or we're going to do the opposite. And the guy who was the obvious choice, like Ben Johnson, is going to be somewhere else doing really, really well. So that's more of the pessimistic option of that, in the sense of, I think wherever he goes or whoever we take, it's going to be the wrong choice. But I do have a realistic opinion on that.
How does Ben Johnson, in your eyes, become the obvious choice?
I think pure hype at this point. I think pure hype at this point. I think it's literally, he has very few connections in the NFL in terms of like a coaching tree or anything like that. I think he has one of the most absurdly talented rosters in the NFL. And the Penei Sewell pass, screen option pass thing, and the whole broadcast just losing their minds about how clever that was. If that was Shane Waldron, everybody would be
Can
ripping
you imagine
into shreds the
if
next
the
day.
1-11 Lions did that play instead of the 11-1 Lions?
It's
that stadium
hype.
might be shaken down to the core.
Yeah, that's why I was like watching that. I'm like, that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And everybody's just like, that was so clever. Ben Johnson almost pulled off another one. And I was just like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever seen. What the fuck are we talking about here?
Because we would see that in Chicago, in Soldier Field, against the Packers. It would get returned for a pick six, and the guy who threw the ball, whichever offensive lineman or fullback, they would have a broken arm. That would be a fireable offense on the spot. But just because the Lions have been investing in their offensive line for 10 years, 10 years of losing football to have an offensive line of 5 middle to high first-round picks, by the way. One of the guards didn't get drafted by the Lions, but they were acquired because I think they had a player in a similar situation, whatever the case was. I do think that Ben Johnson is propped up because of, a broken clock is right twice a day. You're going to be getting all these draft assets, and it's so easy to just dump it into the offensive line because those guys will have a longer career. Doesn't take as much for them to be, rock stars. Penei Sewell, fantastic football player. But I think that Ben Johnson is a little bit overhyped. And at the end of the day, outside of them not having the coaching candidates or connections, how has he proved himself as being a better situational awareness type guy than Matt Eberflus? It literally has not existed, and it could just follow him, or that could follow to the Bears, and we could have kind of this good. I think he is a great offensive coordinator. I think even with the talent, I still think that the way that he's producing, I think it's good. But I think that Matt Eberflus is a really good defensive coordinator. But obviously that did not translate to being a good head coach. So with Ben Johnson, I really don't think that he's this surefire slam dunk, give him $70 million a year, give him the Shohei Ohtani contract. Absolutely not. This guy is the opposite of anything but a guarantee.
I'm with you. I'm doubling down on that. Like we can be the negative Nancys for the offseason if we want to be, right? And if Ben Johnson gets hired, me and you can just hold hands and doubt him for the whole summer, right? But part of this, I wouldn't even go so far as to say Trestman, but he's definitely more of a Nagy. And part of that reason is when you have a guy like Dan Campbell, who's super, super rah-rah and an emotional leader and a situational game manager, there's a lot of yin and yang and contradictions in a team and the structure and all that stuff that you have to do. Aaron Glenn is a really good defensive coordinator, but he's probably pretty aggressive as a defensive coordinator. Ben Johnson is the analytical nerd on that team, while Dan Campbell gets to be the rah-rah loud guy. So if you don't have the rah-rah loud guy as your defensive coordinator, like Mike Vrabel or something like that, and a good, person to keep you in check, we have zero idea about what Ben Johnson is as a coach, as a head coach, as a leader of men. So more so than the fact that I have no doubts about his offensive prowess and of his offensive game planning and scheming and all that stuff, I'm not questioning any of that. I just have no idea if he's going to be a decent head coach. And part of that is, this is crazy theory crafting. I've never seen an NFL coach duck a challenge and be successful. And Ben Johnson saw a field of Jaden Daniels and the Patriots and the Bears and all these different head coaching opportunities and was like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait because I have a good thing going over here, and I'm going to duck away from that challenge, and I'm just going to keep being successful.
If there was
a little bit of a red flag.
If there was one man in the world who would be able to talk me out of millions of dollars and a head coaching position in the NFL to win one for win a Super Bowl, that is, for a team that has never won a Super Bowl, that was Dan Campbell. I forgot what Dan Campbell's standard caffeine intake is, And I think the FDA says that if you take more than like 800 milligrams, you're fucked. I think that Dan Campbell was off the 1,000 milligrams of caffeine, if not cocaine. And
Like for breakfast.
Buddy was talking to Ben Johnson for hours, just saying, like, you have to stay one more year. We are so close. If you win the Super Bowl and then you go to be a head coach and you suck, it doesn't matter, because the city of Detroit, you'll never have to do a single thing there. You'll live there for free. You'll eat for free. So I'm not going to blame that on him whatsoever, because he also knows that just by winning a Super Bowl with the Lions, he's going to make insane money. But the problem here is that I don't want to be the Bears and give it to him, because we absolutely could see Trestman 2.0, Nagy 2.0. Hell, Dable 2.0. That's what the direct comparison is, right? He could go in, transform an offense, have some success, not even go to the playoffs, and be the head coach of the year. That's just what happens. But continued sustained success is absolutely not guaranteed with Ben Johnson whatsoever.
No, and that's part of. So here's my theory and my thought process on going into next year, right? And it's gonna be, yeah. And sorry, Crimson is one of my favorite guys because he just follows us. He follows you. He's everywhere, and I got to give Crimson a shout out when he makes a good point, because Crimson's awesome. Dan Campbell was an absolute joke of a hire in Detroit until he wasn't. Right, he was 0-10-1 until he won his like first game or something like that, and then all of a sudden he was Dan Campbell. Right, so good point by Crimson, and so and I don't necessarily think that Ben Johnson's going to be bad. Somebody's going to get him. Like I said, it's more of a Bears fan just trauma dump right now, where wherever Ben Johnson goes, if it's not in Chicago, he'll probably be great. He'll probably be the best offensive coordinator or head coach in the league next year, rookie head coach of the year or whatever. But if he comes to the Bears, he'll probably be a dumpster fire and just have a bunch of schemes and start throwing it to Larry Borum, and Larry Borum's going to pass it back to Roma Dunze, and Roma Dunze's going to pass it back.
I hope that Larry Borum is only on this roster because of an untimely injury, and I pray to God that if not injured, that he simply would not have made the cut. Maybe he gets brought back to the practice squad and we're still back to square one. But if it wasn't for your top three tackles getting hurt, I'm pretty sure, right? I believe there was a situation where Darnell Wright, Braxton Jones, and Karan were all hurt. That's the only reason he's seen the field. But my God, he fucking sucks. I hate Larry Borum so much. I'm sorry.
No, I know. I'm throwing out a ridiculous name there just to kind of like make the point of Ben Johnson doing this ridiculous shit. And we started this whole question about Thomas Brown. What does he need to do and all that stuff, right? Here's my fears. And I want to go into next year and next season with a coaching staff that is making the Bears noticeably better, right? Whether that's Mike Vrabel, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, even Thomas Brown, depending on how he ends the season. I'm going to leave Thomas Brown out of this conversation. You get Kyle Shanahan by some miracle. You get Mike Vrabel by some miracle. You are going into next year, and the win totals are going up. And you're going into each game with identity. And you're going into each game thinking, hey, this is how the Bears are going to win this game, right? This is how the Bears are going to play. They're going to play hard defense. They're going to run the ball. They're going to throw the ball when it needs to be thrown. Caleb Williams is going to progress. This is all that good stuff that we want to see. But I need a coaching staff that's going to kind of demonstrate that we're on the up rather than a 50-50. So let's say Thomas Brown, your original question, what does Thomas Brown need to do? I don't think he needs to do much to impress George McCaskey, if I'm being perfectly honest, because I think George is going to sit there and cower in fear like the little boy that he is and think, if I let this guy go and he is good somewhere else, mommy will be very mad and mommy will make me feel really sad about this. And mommy will make me, it's all about mommy, like for George, mommy. It's unbelievable. So George is going to operate on fear, and he has forever, and it's demonstrated at this point. And we want to like keep pretending like it's not, but like we've said forever, the Bears do everything 30 to 40% way too late. And Matt Eberflus is probably like 200% too late. But right now, he's going to keep operating under fear instead of confidence. And instead of, I'm going to approach this as the best football owner this offseason, right? If George was a serious person, he would come out and we're going to get to this. I'm going to make the Rams an offer they can't refuse and bring Sean McVay over here. I'm going to bring Kyle Shanahan and the Niners had a mutual parting of ways. I am going to make sure that there is no offer out there that is better. Oh, no. I mean, absolutely. Barrelissimo. Yes, 100%. I've joked about it 100%. The Virginia gets wheeled into every meeting, shits her pants, and then makes a decision. It's literally just clockwork. So George is going to operate under fear this offseason. And I think that's why Thomas Brown does not need to do much to get that job next year. I think it's almost like locked in unless he goes 0-5. If he even goes 1-4 and Caleb ends up breaking the rookie passing record, or God forbid, Caleb has 4,000 yards this offseason, it's going to be Thomas Brown by a landslide, which brings in so many new questions. So now we're going into a new experimental year. Well, Thomas Brown finished 1-4, but he made Caleb look really good. And now we're going to see what happens. And we're going to come into next year going like the Bears could be a 500 team. They could be a 10-win team. They could be a 5-win team because we don't fucking know, because it's Thomas Brown and he had a 5-game audition. And if Thomas Brown went to, like, I don't know, the Bengals, he would make Joe Burrow an MVP quarterback probably. This is me speaking as a trauma dump right now. But I think the standard is going to be so low. But I can guarantee you this one thing. Thomas Brown will probably be hired, and we will absolutely skip on the number one slam dunk candidate. There will be one. There will be Sean McVay. There will be Kyle Shanahan. There will be Mike Vrabel. There will be Bill Belichick. We're going to miss out on whoever the slam dunk candidate will be.
Lots to dive into here. So we're going to start talking about the head coaching candidates that we think are best for the Bears. You've already rattled off some names, but let me answer my own question, which was that what would it take for Thomas Brown to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears next year? It sucks because Thomas Brown is showing yourself, at the very least, that he's a better play caller than Shane Waldron. No doubt about that, right? It sucks because now that Thomas Brown is your head coach, interim or not, he will not be back next year as the offensive coordinator, except under one scenario, and I will cover that scenario in a little bit. You already answered it, by the way. But Thomas Brown to be the head coach next year of the Chicago Bears, I think that you have to have a winning record. And out of those, it's 5 games left. So 3 wins, at least. One of those 3 wins absolutely has to be against the Packers. And I think that it can't just be a win where you squeak a 13-10 off a missed field goal to go to overtime, any of that BS. I think that your offense has to decimate that defense in Green Bay, and you have to win essentially convincingly. That's step 1. Step 2 is probably going to show you that Caleb Williams is leaps and bounds better under Thomas Brown than it is with Shane Waldron. That probably entails being in the top 2 consideration for Rookie of the Year. Because right now it's between Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. Jaden Daniels is in a downward trajectory. What a surprise, because Cliff Kingsbury's paint-by-numbers offense is starting to shit the bed. Again, no surprises there. But what you're seeing out of a Bo Nix is that a very good head coach, offensive-minded head coach that is able to get the most out of your quarterback. And that's what the Bears need to find somehow, some way with Thomas Brown. And if Thomas Brown is able to gel very well with Caleb Williams, and you still just don't feel like Thomas Brown is ready to be the head coach, I think the only way that Thomas Brown can be your offensive coordinator next year is under the tutelage of the head coach being Sean McVay. Can the Bears acquire Sean McVay? 99.9999%, no. The only possible way that conversation can start to happen is when Matt Stafford says, you know what, my body is fucking giving out on me, I have to retire. Cooper Kupp, I can't play with a rookie quarterback, my knees are too fucked up, I need to win now, you have to trade me. Then you've got a Rams offense that only has Puka Nacua. Kyron Williams is a good player, their offensive line kind of sucks. Does Sean McVay want to go through a rebuild, or does he feel like his chances with Caleb Williams would be higher? If he feels like he could be put into that situation with the Bears, then the Bears would have to trade for him. So I like this comment that Plank had said. He said, I'd give 3 first-round picks for Tomlin. Now, I don't know if I'd give 3 first-round picks for McVay, but if the Bears are picking in the top 10, you may have to give that pick up as well as a future first or like Carolina second to really say, Sean McVay, come on down. And again, this is going to be a really aggressive move, and I doubt the Bears would ever make this move. But in my opinion, that's what you'd have to do. I want you, Dave, to answer this question. And we talked about this before we went live. How many names can you list off of head coaches that have been traded for in the NFL? There's probably been some ones that we haven't heard of before, but I believe the stat that I'm referencing is from 1997. So from the year 1997 to present, what are the names of head coaches that have been traded for or acquired via draft capital?
John Gruden, I think they gave up like 2 firsts or 3 firsts to Tampa Bay, or Tampa Bay gave that up to the Raiders. And then the other one I can think of most recently is Sean Payton with the Broncos. Other than that, no obvious ones come to my mind.
Okay, I think that there is one more maybe obvious one. It was Bill Belichick, and I don't know if you just said that name. I kind of spaced out. But I have a little list compiled by Google's beautiful AI to show you the head coaches that have been acquired via draft capital. So obviously, Sean McVay, John Gruden, Bill Belichick. Bruce Arians was acquired for very, very cheap. I believe the Bucks sent a 6th to acquire Bruce Arians and a 7th. And Bill Parcells was also acquired via draft capital, which I had no idea. Mike Holmgren, who is a sneaky good head coach, it was the Seattle Seahawks that acquired him. And I remember Mike Holmgren being a good coach for Seattle. So good kudos to them. And Herm Edwards was not one that I was familiar with. But just looking at these names, man, these are some damn good head coaches. Yeah, so if the Bears really think that Caleb Williams is their guy, which I sure fucking hope they do, man. This kid has been robbed of so many comeback attempts. He is a great quarterback. I honestly, genuinely think that right now, today, Caleb Williams is a top 10 quarterback. J2K would tell me that Caleb Williams needs to be a top 10 head coach. J2K, not to single you out, man. We talked about our Twitter rant at the beginning of the episode. If you want to listen back to that, we'd appreciate that. And again, just want to preface by saying both of us really respect your opinion, because how could we not? But if the Bears wanted to get super bold and Sean McVay is put into a situation where he could be had, you may have to really have a hard look and say, this is the way that we've got to do it. And the silver lining with that would be you get to keep a Thomas Brown who has, hopefully at this point at the end of the season, some chemistry with Caleb Williams, even more than what we're seeing now. Hopefully Caleb Williams continues to ascend the next 5 weeks and really proves to the rest of the world that he's a top 10 NFL quarterback. If you don't want to break that up, but you don't feel like Thomas Brown is ready to be the head coach, he will return under Sean McVay, in my opinion, to be the offensive coordinator. And man, it's going to be crazy, but I think that would be... That's a move that I want. I don't know if it's the right move, but Thomas Brown be your head coach, who's going to be the defensive coordinator. We're going to see just how good Eric Washington is, I believe, as well. We don't have any full confirmation, and I'm hoping that the Bears release something on Monday, or at least Tuesday, just saying this is what our plan is. I don't know, Dave. I don't know if this is a good time to segue into this. I mean, do you think that the Bears can transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4 and have a very hyper-competitive defense next year in a 3-4?
I don't necessarily know. We're talking about key pieces that kind of go into that. Off the top of my head, yes, because I think at least 6 of the majority of your important players will be able to transition into that. Because I think Gervon Dexter is, maybe the most perfect 3-4 tech, like 3-4 nose tech kind of guy, where you can get pressure up the inside.
Andrew Billings would be the guy on the middle of the 3, right?
And then Gervon Dexter transitions. I
agree that Gervon Dexter could be the best suited for that position, because we literally saw him last year, at least, playing defensive end on rushing snaps. Which would kind of what they're asking him to do.
I think of him to be like a Richard Seymour type. Sure,
that's a very rich comparison, and if we were to get 50% of Richard Seymour, I honestly think that would be a home run pick at that point. My biggest fear is that the Bears literally have only one outside linebacker, and that's, maybe 2. The one that is super obvious to me is Austin Booker. He literally played that position in college. He would probably be fantastic at it. And if you want to talk about someone with a high motor, that position would fucking adore it. I think that you'd have like a similar play style to Leonard Floyd, because you could drop him back into coverage if you really needed to because of his length. It wouldn't be ideal. But then the other side, you would be able to ask Montez Sweat to play that outside backer position. The problem here is that, do you view Austin Booker as a starting outside linebacker? And if you do, you have to get depth. Can you sign 2 impact depth pieces behind? Maybe 3, because you may have to like go of like a Jack Sanborn or something like that to be able to fit that onto your roster. Maybe not.
That's a big question, because here's the thing, right? And we're transitioning off of this into the McCaskey, like not going for a Sean McVay. The problem is that McCaskey will never be taken by a guy who is willing to reshuffle his whole team, who is willing to, change multiple sides of the ball. And if you're talking as a Bears team with a window for Caleb Williams that's going to be 3 to 4 years, you are, right? Like me, Paul, I don't know about you so much, but I don't consider changes of coaching staff to be one of those 1 year back to take 2 years forward type of moves. I think that Chargers have demonstrated at this point it is not the case. I think that the Washington coaching staff has demonstrated that's just not the case anymore. If you get an upgrade in coaching staff and they're able to communicate clearly and make adjustments better on the roster that are quick and clean, then you're going to take a step forward. Now, but if you get Thomas Brown and a change in coaching staff, if you start picking off the Sean McVay tree and you start getting Sean McVay or anything like that, and you just need to start spending draft capital and free agency on offense, then simultaneously transition your entire defense into a 3-4, you are going to have to take a step back year to hope that you kind of succeed moving forward. One of the biggest issues that I've observed in the Bears the last 2 to 3 weeks is there's just no coaching on defense in terms of gap scheming, where these linebackers are not picking up and hitting gaps. They're hitting blockers. And I think, Dave, basically just picking up bodies.
Before you keep rolling, and I want you to keep rolling, I just need you to understand this. The loss of Andrew Billings was huge. That is a goddamn good football player. And not only the loss of Andrew Billings, but the replacement of Zach Pickens, who is a fringe second-round pick, the first pick in the third round. He is terrible, man. So that's what you're seeing. You're not allowing the linebackers to get to where they need to be. I agree with your point here, but Andrew Billings is kind of the key in the cog that's making this whole thing work.
I agree, but even Andrew Billings has been hurt for 6 weeks, and we've noticed a considerable drop-off in linebacker play in the last 3 to 4. And so we're talking about half the time. Now, I don't disagree with you at all, because Andrew Billings is 100% the guy that's just – he's probably the smartest guy on that defensive line, if we're being honest, in terms of just understanding where gaps are and what position you need to play to allow the guys behind you to come in and go fit that gap and hit that hole really, really well, which makes TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds play back on their heels really bad. And that's why you see them being absolutely dominated by tight ends the last few weeks and being just picked apart and all that stuff. So it's a bigger question for somebody like me to answer. Short answer is absolutely not. I don't see this team, because if you think about it, the back end safeties in a 3-4, we pretty much got them. Kevin Byard could probably, with veteran time and understanding of the game, probably transition into that. I think Jaquan Brisker would absolutely be the most dominant 3-4 Troy Polamalu type-esque. I'm not asking him to be Troy Polamalu, but that kind of in the box 3-4 safety that's allowed to take risks while Kevin Byard is going in the back and playing some safety. And then I think you have man corners already that you're not really capitalizing on. I think Jalen Johnson's a good man corner.
Actually, this is a super sneaky, insanely good point from you, because I uploaded a video from a discussion I believe I had with Bearski, Paulie. I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Daveski is also Bearski. It's Paulski. But I made a video off of that discussion where I made the point that the Bears should actually consider signing Eddie Jackson. Just do a patchwork job for a game or two to fill in for the injuries that you have. And then you need to find a way to have Tyreek Stevenson's career resuscitated. And I feel like Eddie Jackson would be a good guy to kind of get him back onto the rails. Hopefully Eric Washington is too. But Tyreek Stevenson would actually excel a lot more, in my opinion, in press man. And I like man coverage. I don't know if I necessarily adore playing zero, meaning where if one guy gets burnt in man coverage, the entire game's over because you've just immediately given up 6 points. But I like man coverage more. Jalen Johnson, I know for a fact, would be phenomenal at it. So that's a really good point. I think that you would be able to maximize what you get out of Tyreek Stevenson and hopefully maybe fix him.
I think your back four, your back five are probably really well suited to a 3-4, like you said, and the front seven. It's all about Montez Sweat. Can he become an outside linebacker and like kind of just
which
rush
he
off
did
people?
show you he
has
can
done
on the
as
Redskins.
well,
yeah. Yes,
exactly. So he's done it before. Like you said, I love the Austin Booker point, and that kind of fluctuates. Like that probably gives DeMarcus Walker the boot, right? Because who cares?
DeMarcus Walker could be the other end in your 3-4. He would be just fine at it, and I literally don't know if he played it in Tennessee or what, but I mean, he's capable. I don't know if I think he's under contract next year.
If we're being
he's
honest,
probably not a player you re-sign.
Absolutely, you do not have the inside linebacker talent, so I guess that's your big bugaboo because you've really Patrick Queen is not Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds is a 4-3 over the middle Brian Urlacher type. Like nobody. I don't think he's good at anything else.
I think they could do it.
I think TJ Edwards would have to be your interior linebacker at that point.
It's not wrong. The problem there, and we've seen TJ Edwards come on the blitz, and my most recent memories of the Bears playing a 3-4 was you had Danny Trevathan being your signal caller. I don't know if he was in zone coverage a lot, but it was Roquan Smith who was your kind of silver bullet blitz when you need him to blitz. I think that TJ Edwards would be good at that. He's already showing you he's coming on blitz in the 4-3, and he's good at disguising it. I don't know. TJ Edwards is probably going to be a liability in pass coverage, no doubt. But I think he's intelligent, and I think for what he's under contract for, you'd be able to play him in a 3-4 next year for a year or even 2 years.
Yeah, I don't think any of this is wrong. I think it's a lot of things that would be way over my skis in terms of analysis and see how that quickly breaks down. If you get Mike Vrabel as a head coach and he's insistent upon turning this into a 3-4 defense and he wants to keep 26 out of 29 starters, I'm not going to be thinking I'm smart enough to question him. I don't think I'm going to sit there and say, hey, no, man, Mike Vrabel's crazy. I think the world of Mike Vrabel as a coach and as like a scheme guy. So I wouldn't think so, but I think what the problem would be there at that point is like you're really, really banking on a lot of guys signing in free agency and having a absolute dynamite draft. And I think the holes on this team would be much more suited to, and honestly, if we're talking about complementary football, like I said, and we've mentioned this before on other shows, I don't think Matt Eberflus was even that far off this year. If you just get like a guy who has Matt Eberflus's theory, but just executes more, concisely and accurately to what he's trying to do, this is a team built for complementary football.
A lot of people would tell you that that's Eric Washington. And to that, I'd say we have 5 games to figure that out. So we will see. Yeah.
And honestly, but in terms of the defensive scheme, I agree. But this defense has always been built to be bend but don't break. And but it's a team that's built to bend but not break. In this kind of case, if you had Thomas Brown from the very beginning, and one of the worst things that the Bears are at even this season is getting a lead early and holding on to it. And it's been that way forever since Matt Eberflus has been here. But this team and the way this defense was, like, can you just imagine if this team put on 14 points in the first half and was playing 14 down every single game?
That's the
thing. This team would be 7-2. Like
their run defense is really struggling because of Andrew Billings being out and relying on Zach Pickens, in my opinion. But that's the strength of this team. I will die saying that I feel like whether it's the top-end talent or the depth, or in my opinion, the combination of both, the Chicago Bears have the best secondary in the NFL. So, if you put the team into an obvious passing situation, you're going to see some good stuff. Obviously, what's happening with Tyreek Stevenson, he is getting burnt a little bit. He's not playing as well as he should, but I think that Terrell Smith is a very capable fill-in. Now, I actually have listened to Ben Johnson do a couple interviews, the weekly interviews with the coordinators that all the NFL teams do. Ben Johnson's a guy who can speak to the media, no doubt. He's not a super weirdo. I, at one point, did refer to him as like a potential Adam Gase copy. I don't think that's going to happen with him. I think that he's going to be better than that. But what it boils down to is what we were talking about earlier, right? We have no idea how he's going to be in the clutch, under pressure, situational awareness. We don't know any about that. So for the Bears to replace Eberflus with a first-time head coach, I just think that that's the wrong idea, Barrelissimo.
And in terms of specifically addressing it, like what was it about Mark Trestman versus Ben Johnson? Mark Trestman was supposed to be this like innovator. And here's my biggest issue in the NFL. At some point, the innovators almost always get their lunches taken, right? I remember specifically with Brian Kelly on the Eagles coming in from Oregon.
Oh my God.
And all
I
this
remember
kind of
that team was the super team. They were going to do something similar to the Super Bowl shuffle before the season started. They had so much talent. Yeah. And I don't even think they made the playoffs.
But they were like 4-13 or something, like 4.
Yeah, they flamed the hell out, man.
But absolutely. The problem with that is like he's bringing in this like 4 wide offense and they had like, I remember back then they had like Zach Ertz in his heyday and LaShawn McCoy, and it was just going to be like, how do you cover
Deshaun
all these
Jackson
guys
and his heyday?
How do you cover all this stuff? And guess what happened? Like every time some guy comes in and goes, and I'm going to spread the field out and go 4 wide. You know what Thomas Brown did to simplify and make this team look solid? He condensed the formations and made the field look bigger from the inside out instead of the outside in. Ben Johnson, when you run shit like a Penei Sewell crack toss with a right tackle throw, or when Amon-Ra St. Brown runs some mesh coverage, but he changed the inside mesh route and made it go outside, you do that shit with under-talented and underperforming offensive lines and guys that haven't played together for 2 to 3 years, that shit explodes in the first year. And then that guy gets tossed within a year and a half, looking like a fucking fool for trying to innovate the NFL, when in reality, the reason it worked in the beginning is because you did it in Canada or you did it on the Detroit Lions, and that shit works perfectly in a vacuum. I don't want a guy who has the next hot new theory in football. That shit hasn't worked since the Wildcat or since RPOs got like forced into the NFL and shoved down our throats. That shit is just not going to happen. It's not. You got to run the fuck out of the ball first, because if Ben Johnson didn't have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs and the best offensive line in football, none of his creative passing shit would work either. So you bring that to the Bears with one of the worst offensive lines and an under-talented running game, it's going to be a fucking problem. So I'm not saying Ben Johnson's going to suck. I think he'll probably do pretty well wherever he goes, but the fear and why we're saying it's like Mark Trestman 2.0 and the fear of that, it's very valid, man. It's a valid fear. You can't dismiss the fear and just be like, Ben Johnson's for sure going to succeed because he did it in Detroit. He's doing it with the best offensive line and the best running game in all of goddamn football.
Yeah, the first question for Ben Johnson, if you're interviewing him, would be how much of your success on offense is dictated by the quality of the offensive line? Because the Bears would have to do something crazy to get that level of offensive line in one season, right? Like, I don't think the Bears have a tackle as good as Penei Sewell. You'd have to give up God knows how much capital to get the interior offensive line that they have. It's just not possible. So to your favorite comment, right, is Ben Johnson going to be able to come in and make chicken salad out of chicken shit with this Bears offensive line? I don't know. And they will have the assets to improve it. There's no doubt in my mind that out of the first 3 picks that the Chicago Bears have in this draft, 2 of those picks will absolutely be injected into the trenches. Whether that's 2 defensive linemen, 2 offensive linemen, or a combination of the 2, I don't know. But they will improve, in my opinion. But yeah, I am very, very leery of Mr. Ben Johnson. And Aaron Glenn was actually a guy who, in my opinion, may be more, impressive. Because he's making that Detroit Lions defense look really good with a lot less talent. And the way that he coaches, he does get a little bit fiery. He also has his moments where he's like sitting on the bench, kind of calming down, whatever the case is. If they did hire Aaron Glenn, I don't know if I'd be mad at it, but I believe Aaron Glenn would also be a first-time head coach, I believe. So
the only advantage of that is you're basically hiring a younger Mike Vrabel, a guy who used to play in the NFL, a guy who's been experienced in the playing side and the coaching side, and he's kind of demonstrated it all from the very beginning. The thing that I'm here in terms of like preaching about the coaching staff is my first choices are pretty much off the table. Kevin Stefanski is my first choice. I need an offensive coordinator with head coaching experience and play calling experience, and somebody who can listen and talk to Caleb and hear him out and hear what he likes and hear what he doesn't like and just maximize the talent. I'm not necessarily MS like in the no first timers club because, and I think Paul has kind of given this example, is Kyle Shanahan was a first time head coach leaving Atlanta, right? I don't know the history on Ben Johnson and the Detroit Lions. Was he there from the very beginning with Dan Campbell, or was he? Are you familiar with that, Karl?
I have no idea. I believe the point has been made in this show is that Ben Johnson was on the staff before he was the head, coordinator. Though I think he was elevated after some, the rough start that Dan Campbell had to his tenure.
The other part of that is like I don't know if the Detroit Lions are really, really, really good at keeping this hush hush. But I don't really hear the Detroit Lions talking about Ben Johnson as like, man, when Ben leaves, we're going to be fucked. Or, man, when Ben leaves, we're going to lose an amazing offensive coordinator and he's going to be an amazing head coach. I don't hear that talk. Maybe they just keep it in-house because they don't want him to leave. Maybe they just like don't want a future plan or anything like that. And but the Ben Johnson thing, and just from seeing my brief history of football, I just see another Matt Nagy flash in the pan type of guy who has the perfect situation and the perfect scenario and the analytics and the schematics and all that stuff that works for him. But will that translate to leading men and keeping a simple game plan? Maybe Ben Johnson is really, really smart and he'll see what he has on offense and go, you know what? My fancy shit will not work here. I've seen this before and maybe I need to simplify and maybe I'm good at taking a step back and understanding what I have and how to maximize it. Maybe, I don't know. But the odds of it working out are probably much smaller than they are higher. And that's why, going full circle, like a Thomas Brown experiment, to me, Thomas Brown needs to go minimum 4-1 for me to even entertain the idea of him being head coach. Minimum 4-1. I mean, 4-1, 5-0, man. And I don't even care if they go 5-0 and ruin their draft capital. But if they go 3-2 and you bring Thomas Brown back in next year, what are you bringing back? A 3-2 interim head coach? How is that scary to the next set of to the next year?
My point with 3-2 was that obviously it's a winning record. One of those 3 wins would have to be against the Packers, which the McCaskies would really get a hard on for. They hate the Packers just like me. But then in combination with a winning record, you also really have to have Caleb Williams be the guy. And that's what I think is the most important thing, is making sure that Caleb Williams is set up for success next year and beyond. And if Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams, I have a feeling that I don't know if this is correct or if they will actually do it or if they should do it, but I'm under the feeling that the McCaskey family will ask Caleb Williams his thoughts. If they said, hey, we just got done interviewing these candidates, we also just, of course, got done interviewing Thomas Brown's, what are your thoughts of Thomas Brown being the head coach of this football team? And if Caleb Williams, in a safe environment, can go to bat and say, Thomas Brown is the guy who I want to take my career to the next level and to win football games for the Chicago Bears, I don't have a problem with them hiring Thomas Brown at that point.
I do and I don't, because here's the problem with that. And the only reason I say that is you have to assume and hope and pray that Caleb Williams is confident enough at this point as a second-year quarterback to be like, no, I've seen enough in the NFL to know that this guy ain't it. And this guy who has been an offensive coordinator and coached under Sean McVay and has a great track record and he's said in the last few press conferences, he has an aura about him. Like, you're asking a lot from a 23-year-old second-year quarterback to know the difference between a legitimate professional offensive coordinator who now needs to be his head coach. That's asking so much. I don't disagree with you in theory that the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and the head coach need to be like this. That's obvious, right? But to ask that of the quarterback to decide in his second year is different from asking
not
Peyton Manning or Tom Brady.
Absolutely. Just his opinion. His opinion. Yeah.
No, the opinion will matter, but at that point you need to, it's doing one of two things. It's putting way too much power in Caleb Williams' hands, or it's putting way too much power that he hasn't necessarily demonstrated, that he's not earned. I think Caleb Williams has already earned enough say in the future and his future and what's gonna go on here. But yeah, exactly. Like I think Paulie is kind of saying in jest, like, oh, so Caleb Williams is now your consultant, right? So who's your consultant now? Caleb Williams instead of
oh my
instead
god,
of it
Bill
is kind
Polian.
of the same thing. Instead of Bill Polian, it's Caleb Williams. That's your consultant now.
Thomas Brown, an interview. He's interviewing right now. He's going to be interviewing over the next 5 games. And that's the best possible interview that you can have is on the job. So if Thomas Brown wants to be the head coach, he's got to earn it, and he has every opportunity to do so. I heard so many comments about how Thomas Brown's charisma this, he talks like Barack Obama that. I don't care about that. Show us on the football field. Go out and do it, man. That's how you're going to prove your point and be a head coach, whether it's with the Bears or not, as well to him.
Here, to address the first comment you brought up, Jeremy Munoz, like here's the 2 schools of thought, and I don't know which one I necessarily believe, because I do believe in both of them when they're done by the right head coach. If you have a head coach, he is dictating what type of offense and how aggressive you are calling these plays. Because Matt Eberflus, as we've learned in the last 2 to 3 years, we play scared as fuck. We are game managing from the moment that game starts, and that's, I think, part of the reason why you see these second half comebacks be a little bit more aggressive and work out better. Now imagine the second half of Detroit, but start that way, right? You take the second half, you take the third quarter, but you turn that into the first quarter and you start playing aggressive football from the very beginning, which is what good football teams do. They put you on your heels, they put you on your ass, and then you instantly have a lead, and then that leads to your defense playing better. So it can be very, very important by Thomas Brown being in charge and not being handcuffed. I just saw that Judah got banned. See you later, Judah. Not going to miss you.
Hey, J2K's great point. Don't give oxygen to the fire. Like Mike Tomlin, we made a mistake. We corrected the mistake. We're fucking done with it. Please continue, Dave.
Yeah. No, like, so that's it was a good question by I'm sorry, who was it that Jeremy Munoz at first?
Correct. Yep, I'll get it back on the screen.
It's a great question. It really is. It's a very fair question. It's a question that deserves like actual conversation, because there are 2 schools of thought from that like type of thing. Your offensive, regardless of who your head coach is, it's still the same play caller. But if your head coach isn't saying like, hey, we need a less aggressive, we need to be in a 2-minute drive here, we need to be in a keep the ball type of situation where Matt Eberflus might be telling his offensive coordinator, hey, we're playing for 3 here on this 4-minute drive. We're playing for 3 here. And then Thomas Brown goes, fuck that shit. I'm trying to score once in 1 minute, get the ball right back and score twice before the half. You can see that. That's something that can be done with the attitude of an offensive-minded head coach, and the difference between the philosophies of your head coach versus your offensive coordinator. Your offensive coordinator might have his hands tied by the way that your head coach wants to call that game plan. Maybe more conservative, maybe more aggressive, maybe in the second half, because how Matt Eberflus goes is we got to go look at the tape. We got to go look at the tape at halftime. We're going to go analyze the tape, and we're going to review what we did wrong instead of adjusting on the fly, because Matt Eberflus won't let you adjust on the fly because he's an absolute paranoid loser who has no football IQ. And so maybe Thomas Brown is going like, I saw some shit last drive that we can take advantage of, and we're going to do it right now. It's not going to take me 12 plays to understand it. It's not going to take me 15 plays to make the adjustment. I'm going to do it in 3 because now I'm the head coach, and whether I fucking do it or not, who cares? It's all on me right now anyway. So that's the one school of thought is why that might work out. And to the other side of that, he's still the same play caller. And why would they get better on offense? You're right. They might not, because they might be as limited as they possibly were. For all we know, Matt Eberflus gave Thomas Brown the handle the same way he gave Luke Getsy the handle, the same way he gave Shane Waldron the handle, and said, not my problem. I don't know what I'm doing. But we've heard otherwise in post games. We've heard difference in conferences where Matt Eberflus is talking about how much he wants to be involved in the offense this year, how much he's in these meeting rooms and stuff like that. So it kind of
top 3 head coaching picks. I've already outlined what I feel about Sean McVay. I feel like Sean McVay is one of the best coaches in the NFL. He's literally a Super Bowl winner. If you can acquire him, which I doubt will happen, find a way, make it happen. He's my dream choice. I don't know if this is second, but there's something to me about Thomas Brown that I actually like. I think that, again, it's going to have to take a series of events for it to get to this point. But if Thomas Brown is able to go 3-2, 4-1, and Caleb Williams lights the world on fire, I would be happy with Thomas Brown at that point. So he would be in my top 3. Second, it's a hard choice for me to narrow down with all the names. Obviously, your Kyle Shanahan would be fantastic. I would also love him. I'm also going to lump Kyle Shanahan in with McVay. Honestly, at that point, like if you can acquire either of those guys, those are my unrealistic options.
Just to interrupt you and combine, your Sean McVay is my Kyle Shanahan. So I think that becomes our one where I agree. It's a Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, number 1, unrealistic. If we can somehow get it done, if the McCaskies are ready to write blank checks and Kyle Shanahan has a fucking mutual parting of ways with the 49ers, then that is what needs to happen. So yeah, I'm with you. Let's put that at 1. Okay. Or Kyle Shanahan.
I love that. I love that. Obviously, Scottish Bear, I'm not going to put your comment on screen because I don't want to wipe out Jeremy Munoz, but he says Jim Harbaugh. Last year, absolutely. I feel like I have zero justification. At the beginning of this podcast, I talked about the University of Michigan for like 15 straight minutes. If he was to somehow be the head coach of the Chicago Bears now, I may be dead. My heart may have stopped due to pure happiness. No questions asked there. Other names that are coming through in the chat, I'm seeing guys like Joe Brady. What's the other name that I saw? Mike Glenn.
Liam Cohen.
Yeah, Liam Cohen, thank you. Like these offensive coordinators who are having success with talented offenses, I'm not too bothered by it. You're telling me that the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator should be a head coach because Lamar Jackson, a.k.a. the modern-day version of Peyton Manning, is having success in the regular season thanks to the lucky signing of Derrick Henry? I'm not buying it, man. He can prove me wrong, that's fine. I think in my top 3, McVay, Thomas Brown are 1 and 3. Number 2, I'll take Mike Vrabel. I've talked myself into...
Let's make our second a realistic one.
Yeah. And Mike Vrabel is more than realistic. He's literally available. But the more I listen to him talk, the more that I see, I don't know, there's just something about him that his moxie, whatever it is, I think that he would be a fantastic head coach. But it just sucks when talking about him because he is literally the opposite of the McCaskies. So how can the McCaskies hire him? I don't see him being hired by the McCaskies, but if the Bears were to shock the world in that sense, I'm all for it.
I don't know if you've seen the reason why Mike Vrabel got fired. I am a massive, and I mean when I was a kid, one of my favorite players in the NFL was Mike Vrabel. Like when I was like in high school, one of my top 3 favorite players of all time. I've been a Mike Vrabel stan since he was a player. So I was following closely what happened in Tennessee. And when they traded A.J. Brown on draft day, and did you ever see that clip of him reacting to the new GM that he just... Mike Vrabel basically got fired because a new GM was hired. And he traded A.J. Brown, and Mike Vrabel went, what the fuck are we doing? You could see his lips. You could read his lips in the draft room going, what the fuck are we doing here? We're trading A.J. Brown for a first-round receiver that we hope becomes A.J. Brown. It's the Family Guy clip where he goes, I could have a boat or I could have a mystery box. And in that mystery box could even be a boat. And like, so yeah, I already have A.J. Brown, and I'm hoping in my mystery box is A.J. Brown. And so, yeah, no, a Mike Vrabel, Thomas Brown, Scottish Bear. Yes, dude. Scottish Bear. Yes. That is my almost borderline
that's
dream
the problem,
scenario.
though. Now, I don't know if Mike Vrabel and Thomas Brown have any crossover, but like, can Thomas Brown be the interim head coach and then be knocked down for someone who is completely separate?
I've thought about this for a day or two, and I'm going to tell you maybe. Maybe. Right? That's not a very concise thought. Here's the issue with Thomas Brown becoming or staying as offensive coordinator here.
Mm-hmm.
He has been in 3 teams in 3 years. This is the fact for Thomas Brown. He has been with L.A., Carolina, Chicago. For Thomas Brown, let's say he fizzles a little bit in these last 4 games, but does enough, right, to not look incompetent. Like you said, we're talking about these last 5 games as this audition. If Thomas Brown makes his offense look better, or Caleb look better, or Caleb is, a fan of what Thomas Brown can do for him as a OC, then bringing in Mike Vrabel and potentially replacing Thomas Brown down the line is something that I wouldn't be totally against, right? Because then we are still back in this defensive coach cycle, and maybe not the offensive coach, but the offensive coaching head coach prospects right now, to me, are all huge risks. My dream for a while, and
The realistic
has
ones,
been like
absolutely.
the realistic one. If you're not comfortable with Ben Johnson, as I'm not comfortable with Ben Johnson, I can't be comfortable with Joe Brady. I cannot be comfortable with Ted Monken.
Liam Cohn.
I can't be comfortable with Liam Cohen. Like, I can't. If
boy,
those are my
what a
hesitations,
name. No, Mike McCarthy. No.
Chris, wait. We need to fleece Christian Chavez right now. He's getting the treatment. If you bring up Mike McCarthy one more time as a realistic, no, you're getting banned. No, I'm not serious, Christian, but like, dude, if you bring up Mike McCarthy one more time, I will ban you.
That would be a devastator for me, because I keep preaching Caleb Williams, how great he is. Mike McCarthy could ruin that. Once a Packer, always a Packer. I don't believe in it.
It'd be the most boring.
His success with the Cowboys is very clearly attributed to how well Dan Quinn was able to have the Cowboys defense play. And
Christian, thank you for taking
the uber talent they were able to bring in with the draft. I mean, they hit a home run with Lamb and their quarterback, who maybe a lot of people don't think he's that good. For what he was, the draft pick-wise, that was another slam dunk pick. So I don't think Mike McCarthy does anything to elevate the Bears whatsoever.
It feels like a very McCaskey hire, if I'm being honest.
Terrifying. That's terrifying.
But no, like, so my second choice, we're rounding out this list. If you're taking Mike Vrabel, I'm with you. That would have been my second choice too. I'm struggling to think of a second one. I need a football guy is what I need. I need to see a team that is – there's no other football guys available because they're all being kept by their teams, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Right? So, like,
Kevin Stefanski, I think, is the guy that you're struggling for right now. Kevin Stefanski was the guy who you've been talking about for a while, and it sounds like he's going to be retained.
Yeah, it sounds – that was my dream hire, because – Kevin Stefanski, I just thought with how bad Browns ended up looking this year, he was definitely on the chopping block. But like, at least the Browns are smart enough to know to retain a 2-time Coach of the Year when they see one and when they have one. So good for the Browns. But man, that would have been absolute target for me. The other part of that is, I don't know how much you feel about giving guys a second chance as a head coach. I'm not all for it. But guys like Steve Spagnuolo or like
I thought you were about to say Matt Nagy. Oh my god.
No, fuck no. Get the fuck out of here.
Oh my god.
No, guys like Steve Spagnuolo or like, I don't know, man. Like, those are my second choices, but even then, they're not Mike Vrabel's. I don't want that. No.
I'm not a fan of Bieniemy either. A lot of the chat is bringing up John Gruden. Is John Gruden a name that you're even considering in the slightest?
I did for a hot minute, and then I just realized how much of a joke that would be.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with him, I think, is that outside of some outliers, his track record as far as like your offensive finishes at the end of a season is always in the bottom third. So
no, also just like, guys, like, let's be honest. Like, I love Barstool. I love that he's hilarious with Barstool, and he's an entertaining personality.
Guilty taking him away from Barstool at that point.
He's entertaining.
He is fantastic there.
He's entertaining as fuck with Barstool. But a guy who's just been out of the NFL, that almost feels like another Brian Kelly coaching hire, where it's just like, this is a guy who was away from actual pro football for long enough to the point where he might have forgotten what it's like to be a pro football coach. And he might need to be an offensive coordinator for a few years before you actually bring him back in as a head coach. So my second choice, like, it's such a short list because of the guys that haven't been fired yet, or the guys that haven't really moved on or been switched up yet. I think me and Karl agree completely. It's a Shanahan McVay 1. We have a completely lockstep number 2, and that's Mike Vrabel. And then my number 3, I have a feeling that Karl and I are going to agree, depending on what happens at the end of the year, my number 3 choice is going to be somebody like Thomas Brown, because at that point, like, I think Karl, like, we didn't even talk about this. I hate how much lockstep we are, because I'd like to have a little bit more argument about this, but it's our Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan number 1, like, kind of, it's what Jim Harbaugh would have been last year as our number 1. The fact that they didn't do it is an insult to the franchise moving forward for the next 10 years. Number 2 is Mike Vrabel, and then number 3 for me right now is Thomas Brown. That's my number 3.
Yeah, and I think that this conversation has to be a to be continued slapped on it. A, because I do have to pick up my girlfriend. B, we don't know what candidates are truly available. I think that it's going to be a prime time to revisit this conversation, like on is it Black Monday, the Monday after the Super Bowl, or
I would
the
even
end
argue,
of the regular
I would
season.
argue 3 games into Thomas Brown's tenure.
But what I'm saying is, once the season is finalized, then there's going to be some more firings, and we're going to have a really good picture of what is truly available. And that includes guys who are saying, you know what, this is not working out. Kyle Shanahan, this is not working out. I need to leave. Sean McVay, what the fuck? Matt Stafford's retiring. Cooper Kupp's requesting a trade. I got to get the hell out of here. We will know much better towards the end of the season. I think that's going to be the prime time to talk about it, because right now there's a lot of speculation, and that sucks. Dave, like I said, I unfortunately have to go, and it sucks because this is such a lively chat. It's absolutely fucking phenomenal. This guy right here, the guy watching, you guys are fucking fantastic. You as well, Dave. Had a fantastic show today.